I'm Emma Marshall from OMVIC's communications team, and I'd like to welcome you to our video on fraud prevention awareness. Our experts will discuss current fraud trends that OMVIC and Équité Association have noticed in the motor vehicle sales industry, such as different forms of financial fraud, auto theft, re-VINs, rolled back odometers, and fraudulent ads. OMVIC is Ontario's motor vehicle sales regulator. We enforce the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act on behalf of the provincial government. Our role is to protect car buyers and make sure dealers and salespersons act with honesty, integrity, and fairness. Équité Association is Canada's authority on insurance crime and fraud prevention. They work with insurers across the country to combat fraud and protect Canadians. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers, Sam Cosentino, OMVIC's Director of Enforcement, and Bryan Gast, National Vice President of Investigative Services at Équité Association. Sam joined OMVIC after serving the City of Toronto for 35 years as a police officer with the Toronto Police Service. He has spent most of his career working in investigative capacity, which included organized crime enforcement and professional standards. His time in organized crime enforcement was dedicated to investigating motor vehicle crimes, including the illegal importing and exporting and re-VINning of vehicles. Bryan brings 30 years of experience in law enforcement to Équité Association. Bryan was previously detective inspector in the Criminal Investigative Branch with the OPP, and unit commander of its Anti-Rackets Economic Crimes and Corruption Unit, and unit commander of the OPP Anti-Rackets Branch Provincial Identity Crimes Unit. Bryan believes collaboration through public and private partnerships is essential to combat insurance crime, and he strives to build and maintain partnerships.
Thanks for having me, and great to be here with Sam and his team. Sam and OMVIC, you're leaders in the world of collaboration. And you're doing a great job, and it's great to partner with OMVIC. You look at the numbers of auto theft over the last 4 or 5 years. Obviously, they spiked in 2022. This is the second year where we've seen a decline year over year. This year, 19% nationally, and 26% in Ontario, which is, you might think, well, that's great, move on. But the numbers are still very, very high, historically high, still not pre-COVID numbers. So the collaboration and everybody working together is such an important piece. I get asked often, like, why the decline? What's changed? What's changed is the collaboration that we speak to. The public awareness campaigns, making people aware of how to protect their vehicles in the instance of auto theft. The collaboration with law enforcement. Our expert vehicle examinators across the country, embedded at the ports, working with partners like OMVIC, the collaboration and cooperation. Nobody's working in silos. Law enforcement in Ontario and Quebec working together on projects like Project Vector. Significant disruption to the organized crime. Not going after the individuals stealing the vehicles, but going after the organized crime groups responsible. And then we're going to talk about the trends that we're seeing, because obviously it's a high reward, low risk venture for these organized crime groups. It is a funding mechanism for organized crime, and that's where the public safety piece comes in. It's affecting the communities that we live, whether it be guns or firearms or drugs. That's what's fueling their business, and it's a funding mechanism. So they're not running away from this opportunity to fund their criminality, but they are adapting and looking for new ways to exploit and seek opportunities to make money. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. And again, when we work together, we identify what the trends and patterns are, and we can help project and work with our policing partners as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely, Bryan. I couldn't agree with you more. What has changed, as you mentioned, is the partnerships, the collaborations that has gotten better. Certainly after the National Summit on Auto Theft that the federal government put together back in, I think it was February of 2024, acted as a bit of a springboard and a wake-up call for a lot of us in the automotive world to work together more and more. This is not a problem, an issue that can be solved by any one person, any one entity. There are so many pieces to auto theft that we all need to work together on, whether it's through the registration process, law enforcement, the ports, CBSA. We all have to find a way to work collectively to, address auto theft. And, obviously the auto manufacturers play a role as well, but it's the collaborative piece that's important. And, as you mentioned, Brian, we've got really good signs that auto theft is on the decrease, which is great. But again, also as you mentioned, it's not. Although we celebrate this, I don't think it's time for us to break out the champagne bottle and take our foot off the gas, because there's still a lot of work to do. Certainly from a historical perspective, I agree with you that the numbers are still way too high, and we need to continue to bring them down, because this only goes to feed organized crime and their other illicit ventures. I think, it looks like the theft rates nationally are down about 19% in the first half of this year, and in Ontario they're even better than that. I think they're around 25%, if I'm not mistaken. Some of the other indicators that I look at that I think are important are the recovery rates, and I know that over the years, the recovery rates have certainly gone down, and low recovery rates are usually a good indication of the involvement of organized crime, because these folks are the ones that are able, that have the players in place to make these vehicles disappear one way or another. So, nationally, I think the recovery rate is around 55, 56%. Here in Ontario, it's under 50%. So more than 50% of the vehicles here in Ontario are not being recovered. And so that is a very clear indication of the involvement of organized crime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good point. We use the recovery rates as indicators as well, because if you look at other provinces where they typically had higher recovery rates, it's not an enforcement issue. It's what the intent or the purpose of the vehicles being stolen is. So
Right.
You look at Alberta with generally a higher recovery rate, and what's interesting about those numbers is they're starting to come down as those criminals gravitate to other provinces. They're stealing vehicles in those provinces and then shipping them overseas out the eastern port. So it's a long way to go by train to get that vehicle out. But again, they're looking at that lucrative opportunities. You talked about the summit, and I was impressed with the summit. But I do want to acknowledge really, Ontario was a strong leader in building the momentum, the funding that was provided to law enforcement. The provincial auto theft team was stood back up. The special prosecutors that were brought in to deal with these organized crime groups that are responsible for it. And then the intelligence sharing. I mean, you're absolutely right. Feeding that information and collectively using it, being an intelligence-led, has been a significant factor. So, and then obviously it is not just an Ontario problem, it's a national problem. So the fact that the federal government saw the public safety concerns and initiated the summit, it's been monumental in the step forward to combating this. So I mean, Canada's been seen in the last few years as the donor country for stolen vehicles. So we're being targeted because they have, and people wonder, well, why Ontario? Why are more vehicles being stolen here? What's the difference? Well, there's three significant differences in my view. Pure population. We have a very high population in a concentrated area. We have a high volume of targeted vehicles, the ones that organized crime are looking at, and the proximity to the Port of Montreal.
Right.
There's other exit points, but those 3 points make the GTA and everywhere in Ontario and Quebec as targets.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And you spoke about the intelligence piece. That's such an important piece here. More than ever, we're working very, very closely with our partners, whether it be Service Ontario, MTO, law enforcement, and the insurance companies, to make sure that we are sharing information as we can properly do so, because without that, there's a lot of missing pieces. And last year, there was a lot of good work done here in Ontario to create a more robust vehicle registration process and help close some of the gaps and loopholes and weaknesses in the registration process. So having said that's great, and I'm not saying that the work is done, because there's certainly some more work to be done in that area. But unfortunately, what we have seen is that other provinces haven't necessarily followed suit. And we are finding that bad actors are now going to other provinces to exploit their weaknesses, and the fraud actually is created now in a different province. And then once that vehicle identity is established in that province, then they bring that legitimate permit from the province where the fraud took place into Ontario. So, these are all things that we have to be aware of, that we don't want to be moving the problem. And I think on a national level, we need to all be on the same page when it comes to creating very robust vehicle registration processes, so that the weaknesses aren't exploited elsewhere. And, we're just kind of moving the problem a little bit. Things like that. And we've talked about creating some sort of a national database where we can keep track of VINs of vehicles that have been exported, because we know it's all too often that these vehicle identities are being targeted and exploited by organized crime to create new false identities of vehicles that will then go on to re-VIN vehicles. So there's lots of work to still do there on a national level, and I know that there's work being undertaken behind the scenes, because of course we also want to make sure that on a national level, at least to start off with, we have some sort of systems in place that will not allow duplicate VINs to be registered in multiple provinces, because right now that's one of the weaknesses that we find that exists, and that is exploited by organized crime.
Yeah, excellent points. And that national VIN registry, or however you want to, or increasing the capabilities and making it more effective, the IRE, whatever that looks like, you're right. The more data points, the more data sources, whether it be vehicles exported, vehicles that are living in the United States, vehicles that pinging off the manufacturer sites, just things that can identify if that vehicle exists in North America. Because you're right, it's or they're salvage vehicles, whatever
Right.
the case may be. I mean, one of the trends that we're seeing in a significant way is exactly what you were saying. As Ontario took efforts to tighten the registry process to try and diminish fraud, now we're starting to see other jurisdictions. And that's one of the red flags when you're starting to see vehicles come in from other provinces. I'll use it. Alberta would be a good example, where per capita they have more auto thefts than even Ontario and Quebec, and a significant re-VIN issue. But that's where they're being registered for the first time, and then they're being transferred over. And one of the interesting trends, and we do have the benefit of looking coast to coast on what the numbers are, is historically it's always been older vehicles that are stolen in Alberta. The older pickup trucks used as a crime vehicle, could be used for an armed robbery, whatever the case may be, and then left abandoned, which is one of the reasons their recovery rates were higher. They were either burned out, left on the side of the road, or just left abandoned. That's what the purposes of that vehicle is. Now, more and more newer vehicles, luxury vehicles, are being stolen, put onto the registry system, and then you're absolutely right. Instantly, it's transferred to another provinces. Those receiving provinces believe that it's already been through a rigorous process of it's just an interprovincial transfer.
Right.
But you're right. Once all of the provinces are harmonized with their approach, and you're right, there is work being done in the background, and I'm excited about what that might look like. And there is work to be done, but it's great to see that there is steps forward. As criminals will identify where the gaps are, and what looks like a convenience will be an opportunity for them.
Absolutely. And, we're seeing some other areas that are being exploited by organized crime. And like I said, when we identify these areas, we work very closely with our partners, including, MTO and Service Ontario, to try to address it as quickly as possible. But like I said, there's still lots of work to be done in the whole area of the registration piece. There's still work to be done. I mean, we've come a long way, and I'm very grateful for the work that has been done and the changes that have been implemented, but there's definitely still more work to be done. Definitely, and I think you can attest to this, Brian, from the vehicles that your folks have identified, is that we're seeing really good quality re-VINs coming into the marketplace, and the fraud behind it seems to be more and more elaborate. We're seeing curbsiders, unregistered entities who are not licensed through OMVIC to sell vehicles, selling and trafficking stolen re-VIN vehicles to unsuspecting consumers. But what has changed also in the last couple of years is that we've actually seen a lot of these stolen re-VIN vehicles ending up on dealer lots, which is a bit concerning, because you would think that professionals in the market are better equipped than the average consumer to identify problems with a vehicle. But I don't fault them one bit. It's just the fact that the frauds behind these re-VINs and the quality that is going into re-VINning these stolen cars is so superior now, better than ever before, that they can and do fool even professionals in the market.
Yeah, really good points. I mean, we have the added benefit of every vehicle that's stopped was intended to be exported. Every stolen vehicle that's intercepted at the borders in the eastern ports are vehicle identifiers to the export vehicle exams. And you're absolutely correct. The quality of these re-VINs, I mean, re-VIN vehicles have always left the country in a smaller percentage, but ever since that the national summit, when it was announced that any vehicle that's reported stolen in Canada, so February 13th, 2024, now anything that's reported stolen to law enforcement in Canada that goes on to the CPIC, the Canadian Police Information Center, now gets uploaded to Interpol database. And that's a big thing. So that's been a shift. So although we always had a sampling, a very small percentage, less than 5% of vehicles that were being re-VINned that left the country, some decent quality, some not so bad quality. But now, as you mentioned, the quality of the re-VINs, because it adds value for them, because now they know once it gets overseas, they have to disguise the true identity of that vehicle overseas.
Right.
Out, it's just going to be recovered. Because right now we work with law enforcement, RCMP, Interpol, the insurance industry, and law enforcement, repatriating vehicles from over 50 countries right now.
Right.
So it's they need to make that vehicle as clean as possible, even when it gets over. So, I mean, we won't get into the details on how they're doing that.
Of course.
We'll leave some of those investigative things out. But you're absolutely right. The quality is sometimes it's detected once it goes to our examination center, where it's the sheer sophistication of their efforts is revealed.
Yeah, they are very good at what they do, that's for sure. The different levels that they're going to mask the true identity of the vehicle really is incredible, and it fascinates me. But and these vehicles fetch a lot of money because they're so hard to detect. Can be so hard to detect.
And I'd be interested on your take. Another changing trend that we're starting to see, I mean, is the whole fraud finance. I mean,
Yes.
fraud finance was a thing when I was in law enforcement. It seems to be growing exponentially right now. The number of vehicles that are leaving the country that are straight steals versus fraud finance vehicles is increasing. And as recent as yesterday, high quality fraud finance vehicles that have been already re-VINned. So they've orchestrated their organized crime groups to steal the vehicle. They're getting a brand new vehicle. And this is where opportunity thrives for these criminals. Again, in no way is this meant to be a how-to guide as to make money through stealing vehicles. But this is fairly common knowledge, the fact that these organized crime groups are stealing vehicles through fraud financing. And then they're also putting an insurance policy on these vehicles. So not only have they stolen that vehicle and paid no money for that vehicle through the fraud, but now they're putting an insurance policy on it. Once they know that it's been exported out of the country and is where it needs to be, then an insurance claim goes in, and then they're selling it. So they're multiplying,
Double and triple dipping.
Yeah. So
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The fraud is definitely increasing out there when it comes to automotive financing. And I think in addition to what you just covered, Brian, the other thing that we are seeing as well is financing of vehicles that don't actually exist, right? So there's no physical vehicle. Organized criminal groups, again, are finding creative ways to create identities for vehicles that no longer exist in one way or another. And then these vehicles are financed and they are insured. And so, in many cases, you actually don't even need to steal a physical vehicle. All you need to do is figure out a way to create the vehicle identity and then, get financing from the banks and get it insured through an insurance company and, make a theft claim, which is usually what happens after the fact for a vehicle that doesn't even exist. So that's kind of a concerning trend that we've seen happen at some dealerships as well.
And you mentioned the curbsider. I mean, that's a huge concern, and one. And I know we'll get into the preventative tips on how to protect yourselves from that, but it's definitely one of the areas. Again, anywhere that they can find money, ways to profit from this. So whether they're stealing it for export, stealing it for re-VIN, but chop shops is another one that. I know back in your TPS days, that was probably what's old is new again. It's not that it ever went away. It's just really it's being utilized for different purposes now. Not only as a funding mechanism to sell a vehicle, steal a vehicle, sell it,
Yes,
chop it into multiple parts and piece by piece, but they're also so organized that they are supplying the repairability of the vehicles that they already stole and shipped overseas a year ago. So they're their own parts supply chain, right, as well. So it's chop shops we're seeing is a significant concern as well.
Yeah, and again, that goes to speak to the low recovery rate. So vehicles that have been exported or re-VINned really, really well or chopped, it's going to be hard to find those vehicles and get them on our recovery stats. And certainly, lately, because of all the efforts that have gone into the ports to make sure that there's more checks and balances in place to prevent stolen vehicles from being exported, bad actors, criminals, they are pivoting and figuring out different ways to make money on stolen cars. And certainly, there's a huge market for aftermarket parts. And if those aftermarket parts can actually be original parts from stolen vehicles, even better. And this is where again, as far as OMVIC perspective is, we have curbsiders that buy and sell insurance salvaged vehicles, and some of these salvaged vehicles are damaged significantly. And if they can get parts at a very discounted price, then they will. And so we are finding that a lot of vehicles being curbed by these unregistered entities are using these lucrative markets to source parts. And a lot of times these vehicles aren't even repaired properly. So we find things like airbags are missing. They're not even replaced, and if they are replaced, they're probably not installed properly. Structural damage that goes unrepaired. And just think of someone who buys one of these cars and somehow gets involved in a police investigation, and now that vehicle is now the focus of an inspection, and these folks end up getting back half a car because the hood, the fender, and who knows how many other parts are identified as being stolen. So those are some risks with buying cars from curbsiders, because you just don't know where they source their parts from, and you don't know whether or not the car's been repaired properly. And then of course these cars are insured and they're on the road, and do you really want your wife or your daughter driving around these cars? Because it also creates a public safety issue when you have structural damage that goes unrepaired.
Absolutely. And I mean, public safety issue is significant concern. As is, it would be a very bad day if you spend $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on what you thought was a good, truly good, valued used vehicle, to find out it was a stolen vehicle. You did not buy it through a licensed dealer, and there's no protections for you, and that vehicle seized as a vehicle of crime, and you're not getting that money back. So that's and I know that happens on a regular basis.
Yeah, I know, and I'm glad you brought that up, because certainly when you buy privately, there are no protections in place for you. And again, that's why from an OMVIC perspective, we always recommend buy from an OMVIC registered dealer, because if something like that does happen, if a vehicle ends up getting seized by police for, because it's a Re-VIN or something like that, there is a compensation fund that is available to consumers in certain circumstances. So you do have more protections in place when you buy from an OMVIC registered dealer. So yeah, definitely good point.
Oh, perfect. And I don't mean to be all doom and gloom, because there's things that are going on behind the scenes to, yes, it's harder to register fraudulent vehicles especially in Ontario right now. Like you said, there's still some work to be done, but there's still vehicles out there that are already on the system. How do we deal with those? And again,
Right.
I guess my message to that would be, there's a lot of excellent enforcement work that's being done, and we'll continue to work with our partners on that.
Yeah.
It's again slowing what's going on to the registry and dealing the backlog.
Right.
Is the goal, and then ultimately, like you said, protecting that nationally, so we're not being victimized inadvertently by inconsistencies across the country. And I know you're an expert in many areas, and it always fascinated me how easy it was back in the day just to roll back the odometer. That's why it's called rollback. But now it's technically not a rollback anymore.
That's
the same end product. But what's your thoughts on and how common is the vehicle or the odometer rollbacks?
It's very common, and a lot of our investigations that are curbsider investigations, unregistered investigations, are odometer rollback issues. And a lot of times we get these complaints from consumers about, they bought a car from a person and it was a bad car, and we realized that the person is a curbsider. A lot of times people don't even realize that the car they bought had an odometer rollback. In fact, we usually bring it to their attention because through our investigation, we find out that, on top of the fact that you bought an insurance wreck, a salvaged vehicle that was not repaired properly, it also has an odometer rollback, and they're obviously taken back. Because, of course, the more they can roll back the odometer, the more value there is to the vehicle and the more profit there is for them as well. So, again, for people buying cars privately, you really have to do your homework. You really want to be able to get proper backgrounds on that vehicle, whether, you get your used vehicle information package from Service Ontario or a vehicle history report. There's clues on all these reports that should set off some bells and whistles potentially for you to ask more questions, or for you to say, you know what, there's too many question marks here. I'm going to walk away from this deal. But yeah, definitely odometer fraud is quite prevalent out there. We are finding also more organized unregistered activity. So these are organized criminal groups who engage specifically in the buying and selling, repair of vehicles, and they're coordinated, very, very sophisticated individuals. And these are groups, these are organized criminal groups that you have an entity that buys and sources the vehicles. You have somebody else that sources parts. You have somebody else that is involved in the repair portion. And then you have somebody else that's involved in selling that end product. So we are actually seeing more organized, unregistered activity. And, more and more we're working with law enforcement because, a lot of our investigations end up crossing over to criminal investigations. And not only that, we're also finding out that a lot of the profits from this unregistered activity is going to fund not only illicit activities, but terrorism as well. So we have a few investigations on the go with that, I'm not going to get into, but, it is funding, terrorism as well.
Absolutely, and we learned that with our partners with Interpol. They see it at an international level, and not only is it sometimes the vehicle that's being used, but you're absolutely right, the funding mechanism for organized crime, following the money. So it's, and I know that's one of the big areas that got the federal government's attention too, is when our international partners are looking at Canada as a donor country, and what are you doing about it? So it is great to see how much has been done. Like you said, still a long way to go.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Yeah. And some of the other things that we are also seeing in the curbsider world is lien frauds. So individuals who can no longer afford to make payments on their vehicles are now selling vehicles to unsuspecting consumers with existing liens. And then, of course, potentially that vehicle can be seized by a bailiff or a sheriff once it's in your possession, and then you're out of luck again. But we're also seeing lien issues at some dealerships as well that are finding themselves in financial issues, and they're robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of thing. And so that's concerning. And something like that we really jump on to make sure that it doesn't spiral downhill and cause more consumers additional harm.
and I thank media for doing a good job with identifying what the problem was. And I think that's been a big piece, is equipping people with how to protect themselves from that. And not only the media, but organizations like OMVIC doing things like this. Équité is one of our focuses, is to protect all Canadians from insurance crime.
Right.
Not only through analytics, but through the investigative services as well. But there are tips that people can do. And we call it a layered approach when it comes to protecting your vehicle from auto theft. Not everybody has the ability to park in a garage, but if you do, park that vehicle in a garage. If you don't, park in a well-lit area. Use an aftermarket immobilizer. Use an aftermarket tracking device. Again, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to make it into Fort Knox, but if you can do 2 or 3 of these things,
Right.
Use a steering wheel lock, using a pedal lock, using an onboard diagnostic port lock, anything that makes your vehicle, because as you know, it's time and effort. They might not have the tools or the time to be able to be stealing your vehicle when a similar vehicle is not too far away. So when it comes to auto theft, there are some things you can do. Yes, there's some longer term processes looking at harmonizing the vehicle standard to make the vehicle having the standard modernized. The current one was first drafted in 1998, mandated by Transport Canada in 2007. US and Canada are looking at harmonizing that standard to reflect the modern methods of theft. So programming thefts, relay attacks, CAN bus attacks, really weren't things back in, they were in their implementary phases back in the early 2000s. So those are some of the things when it comes to auto theft. Obviously, that communication piece to the public are big ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, when buying privately, if you choose to buy privately, and again, there's nothing wrong with buying a car privately. You just have to really be careful and do your due diligence. But, we always recommend make sure you know who you're buying the car from, because a lot of times curbsiders will obviously try to hide their identity. The vehicle is rarely registered to them. It's usually registered to a previous owner. They're not going to want any record of a transaction, so it's usually a cash deal. So those should be red flags as well. But make sure you are buying the car from the lawful owner, the person who's lawfully able to sell that vehicle to you. So that would mean ask to see identification, look at the permit, look at the person's driver's license. Does it match up? If it doesn't match up, you may want to be asking questions like, who are you and how is this vehicle related to you, and why are you selling this car if it's not registered to you? So know who you're buying the car from, and of course, do your homework on the car. It's worth your time and a little bit of money to spend to get a used vehicle information package. There's lots of good information on there. It talks about, it's got odometer history that's recorded on there. It's got previous owners, and it'll also tell you whether or not there's any liens on the vehicle, because as I just mentioned not too long ago, we're finding a lot of people who are finding themselves in financial situations that they're selling their cars, but they're selling their cars with existing liens. So that's not helpful. And of course, spend the money on vehicle history report. There's a lot of good clues on there to help you decide whether or not this is the car to buy. Ask for service records. If it's a legitimate owner who's owned this vehicle for an extended period of time, they're going to have the service records, and the service records will tell you obviously that the vehicles followed a structured service program, but it'll also give you indications as to consistency with respect to the odometer, to make sure that you're not buying a car that actually has an odometer rollback. And of course, we always recommend buy from an OMVIC registered dealer, because there's protections in place that aren't afforded to you when you buy privately.
No, absolutely. And again, I don't mean to be an alarmist, but again, do your own due diligence. Don't take things necessarily at face value. If they hand you a piece of paper that's saying, "Hey, we've done this for you. We've got a third party one beyond the whether it be a Carfax report or whatever the case may be, as well as the used vehicle information package." Documents can be altered. Fraudulent documents exist all the time. So make sure what they're providing you is actually legit. Like you said, do your own.
Right.
And if they don't match up, because it might look clean on that piece of paper they're giving you, but that's the problem.
You know what? That's an absolutely excellent point, Brian, because we actually did have a few cases where Carfax reports were provided to the buyer, but the Carfax report was altered to make it look as if there were no issues behind it. And then the same thing can happen, you know, with used vehicle information packages. That's why I would recommend get your own documents.
Yep.
Do that piece yourself. Spend the money.
Absolutely. And both those tools, the used vehicle in Ontario and the Carfax throughout North America, is a great tool to use, as well as something simple. Chances are you'll get a negative hit on it, but run the 17-digit VIN number on Google.
Right.
And it's amazing what may or may not come up. Hopefully nothing comes up, or just what should come up. But if you see that same VIN being for sale or vehicle for sale
Right.
in other jurisdictions, again, just one of those other clues. And it used to be that they would sell them for a discounted rate, so you sort of knew what you were getting. So
Right.
it was, you didn't want to pass up the offer, even though you knew there might be a little bit of a risk. But they're actually selling for fair market value in some instances.
Right.
So the problem is, if you don't do your complete due diligence, not only you're out the vehicle, but you're out that extra money. So
Right.
Those are great tips as to how to protect yourself. And again, it's really knowing the seller, identifying as much as you can. And I've talked to many people, many investigators, especially in the insurance industry, when they look into the theft claim or the history of the vehicle, where some of these red flags did pop up, but they just didn't act on them. And
Right.
they sure after the fact wish they did. Simple things like it was cash.
Right.
They met in a public location. Sometimes that's done for safety reasons for both sides, but it's also done to be anonymous too. So how did they get there?
Yeah, exactly.
Did they just roll in that vehicle and they're walking home, or whatever the case may be? So it's
Yeah, all of these clues, all of these red flags that you know, make you question whether or not you should be dealing with this individual, for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I mean, I'm not a risk taker unless I know exactly who that person is that's selling the car. I'm going to, whether used or new, I'm going to a dealer just for that security and confidence.
You're a wise man. And you know, just pivoting a little bit, we've been talking about consumers, but I think there's also a piece that involves, you know, dealerships as well. And you know, for anybody in the industry, one thing that I would recommend and say is, don't think that your dealer can't be the victim of some form of a fraud, or whether or not, you know, whether it means, you know, you're taking in a stolen Re-VIN on a trade, but some of the other trends that we are seeing with dealerships is bad actors figuring out a way to have vehicles registered to the dealer, so through the dealer's RIN line. So that's one thing that's happened. And you know, you want to make sure that, you know, from time to time you do an audit of your RIN and see if it makes sense. See if in fact all those vehicles that are in your RIN are properly there, and there's no new vehicle that popped up that was never ever in your inventory. And the reason criminals will do this is if they can give the vehicle history as sort of an air of legitimacy, and have that vehicle run through like a legitimate dealer, their hope is that, it gives it some clean, legitimate like background history. And their hope would be that, when you report it stolen, the insurance company starts looking into it and might be less likely to question its authenticity, because if they see that part of the history was that it went through a properly registered dealer at some point, they may not question whether or not that vehicle was legitimate or not. So criminals do exploit dealer RINs. So I would strongly recommend from time to time to carry out an audit and make sure that all those vehicles that are in your registrant identification number are there properly.
It's interesting. There's so much commonality between Canada and the U.S. where we're having vehicles that are coming both ways that we need to be concerned with, not only province to province, but how vehicles are getting in, and then the Canadian vehicles that are actually leaving the country. And we're seeing criminals adapt as so much focus has been on the Port of Montreal, even though the numbers of recoveries are down. They're still finding ways to get out of the country, not only through the Port of Montreal,
Right.
but through other ports. And I'm not going to name them all, and I'm not going to name how they're getting them out of the country. But again, I guess my message to the criminal is, it's amazing the united front that law enforcement, private, public sector is working together to combat this. And there was a period of time where resources were depleted. There was, I think we can learn from the past, just after the 2000s, 2007, a lot of the specialized units diminished. It's great now, the fact that pretty much every major police service in Ontario have a dedicated auto theft unit. The provincial auto theft team has been stood back up again. So, and the common and that working partnership across the country is great. So not a great time for the criminals to because they don't have the free rein that they did a few years ago, and looking at those organized crime groups when it comes to org crime charges are much more significant than a fraud over 5,000 or a theft over 5,000.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Listen, I'm extremely grateful to certainly our provincial government here in Ontario for providing the support and the funding with the special prosecutions, with all the added resources to law enforcement. Like you said, back in the early mid 2000s, when I was doing auto theft, we got to a point where it was, no amount of auto theft is good. I mean, we don't want to see any of it, but certainly compared to today's numbers, it was far, far lower.
Yeah.
And our recovery rates, I remember our recovery rates being around 75%. And now the fact that, we're only recovering about, half of the vehicles that have been stolen, that's where we have to continue these efforts to make sure that we stay on top of it. And like I said, we can't take our foot off the gas here. We need to carry on. We need to continue. The resources needs to be in place because, as we know, property crimes is what feeds organized crime. It's easy money for them. And again, you spoke about the low risk and high reward. Like we have to flip that upside down.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing what we can learn from our international partners, because we don't need to recreate the wheel. I mean, we look at other jurisdictions, what's happening there. U.S. have obviously 10 times our population, and they have 10 times the vehicles being stolen. So proportionally, it's very similar. I can give an example of There's an organization, if people aren't familiar with, IATI, International Association of Auto Theft Investigators. One of the best things about that is the networking. We can share information. A good example would be there was a theft of a vehicle. Hadn't seen that method of theft historically or ever. Not only our investigators shared it with law enforcement, sent it to our partners in South Africa, and they just started to see that type of theft. I won't describe what it was, but just a modern method of theft that we hadn't seen before. And then they had seen it about 6 months prior to that, and then we started to see it. So the criminals don't have borders, and they don't have rules.
Right.
They don't have laws that protect them. So the more that we can share that information, work internationally, work outside of our silos, and I'm not saying people work in silos because the collaboration has been fantastic, but just to give consumers a vote of confidence. There is so much that's being done on a global stage to protect Canada, and then even domestically, nationally. There's a lot going on, and OMVIC is a key partner and a key component of that. So I thank you for all of your efforts and your team, because it is making a difference.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Brian, and we are more than happy to work with our partners. And like I said, that happens every single day. And like you mentioned, the collaboration piece is extremely important, and that's something that we need to continue. There's definitely still some barriers with in some instances with exchanging of information, but I'm hopeful that we can work through it so that we protect the Canadian public, we protect consumers who are buying cars, and we do everything possible to identify criminals, prosecute them, hold them accountable, because it is something that's happening at a global scale. This isn't something that's just localized. These are international criminals that are profiting from Canadians, and you don't want to be a source country. I mean, that's never a good thing when you're a source country for illicit goods. So that's something we have to change.
Absolutely.
A special thank you to Sam and Brian for sharing their valuable insights on motor vehicle sales fraud and practical tips to help protect yourself from becoming a victim. If you're looking for more information on auto sales fraud prevention, please visit omvic.ca or equiteassociation.com.